Welcome back to another episode of Read More Comics, Moore, where we're endeavoring to unpack the Alan Moore bibliography of comics and graphic novels. He had a pretty tremendous output for about 40 years at this point. There's a lot of his comics that I've not read. Let's examine some of the hits, and then let's also examine some of the less known works. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Tom Scholey.
And this episode, after a rousing success with our Miracleman 1 episode, let's unpack issue 2. The artist of this issue, Gary Leach and Alan Davis, is on the docket here as well. Once again, both of these artists, Alan Moore has some experience with from 2000 AD. But why don't we dive right in?
Okay.
Now, in the first episode, when we uncovered the first 4 chapters of this narrative, we were talking about how Alan Moore was sowing a lot of seeds. He's putting a lot of material in there, things that will bear fruit many issues later. And probably one of the most important things that we didn't mention is the fact that when Liz becomes comfortable with the Miracleman persona, she has sex with that version of her husband. And that plays a big part of the material in this issue and future issues.
Sure.
This is Chapter 5, the 5th installment that would have been in Warrior Magazine circa 1981-82. And this issue of Miracleman, to me, is like trial run for issue number 15. This is the first big battle.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, like, if their battle didn't end,
we should say, this is the big battle between Kid Miracleman and Miracleman.
It's a huge battle. This comic came out not too long after like Superman 2, and I can't help but think Alan Moore saw like the superhumans fighting each other in Superman 2 and was like, I could do that so much better.
The treatment of the superhero battle in this comic, in terms of scale, in terms of how they visualize the impact of punches, in terms of how they put a little bit of thought into how some of the physics of everything would work out with superhuman characters, it really wasn't done this way in American comics. We really just took for granted the things that like Kirby laid down and the things that the better superhero artists of our culture of comics put out there into the world, and having a fresh set of eyes on this very kind of like American trope. This is how you get this like added level of thought. So the impact of the punches is far more severe and devastating than a lot of the fights that you see in American comics. And then there's just even like little things like how Kid Miracleman just grabs a random baby and throws him into the sky, and then Miracleman has to like dash off, catch the baby, save it, but the kid doesn't escape unscathed, has a couple broken ribs, is messed up.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like when Gwen Stacy died, that like, him zinging, trying to catch her with his web, if you thought about it, in a real way, like the web isn't going to save you. It's, if anything, it's going to, make your neck snap. So it's like that.
Okay, so there's one example in American comics. The chapter begins with Kid Miracleman is sort of chasing down on that terrace Mike Moran and Liz, Mike's wife, and enter like basically a Star Trek red shirt, which would be the secretary for Johnny Bates there at the company headquarters. And she made the mistake of spilling a coffee pot.
Yeah, it's coffee keeps coming up in Alan Moore's work. Like I don't know what it means or why, but it was in For the Man Who Has Everything. It was in the previous issue of it. Like it's in Watchmen. They make an issue about coffee. So coffee's in there, and he says, you spilled the coffee, and then he does like he laser vision in her face or whatever it is, but she ends up looking like Norman Bates's mother, that he keeps in the basement, which again, like Bates, the way that sequence happens is real interesting. It's like a series of like very wide panels, so you can sort of see the chase. I don't know where Mike Moran is in all of this.
Yeah.
Because he's like, Liz, run! And then it's this wide thing. You see Kid Miracleman over here, you see Liz here, and then you see the secretary over here. So it's almost like Miracleman just like, split. Like he's like way out of panel, way ahead of everything. He's like, hey, Liz, you run too. I'll reach outside.
Yeah, we should once again highlight the fact that these chapters are between 6 and 8 pages apiece, appeared in Warrior Magazine. So Alan Moore, Gary Leach, they had a lot of stuff that they needed to communicate with very few pages. Mike could have been included in some of those compositions, but what can you do?
Yeah. The title of this first chapter is Dragons, and I thought that was interesting because it's not dragon. It's not that like Kid Miracleman, Johnny Bates is like this horrible monster. All through this issue, they're both monsters. They're both considered monsters.
They are, and we'll get there. Like in the next chapter, that'll be crystal clear because we're going to get better glimpses of their origin story. Yeah. When Johnny Bates, Kid Miracleman, and Miracleman begin their fight, every punch is meaningful. Guys are flying through walls, like many series of walls. Miracleman gets driven deep into the ground.
Yeah.
At a certain point when he hits like a certain Mach, like it's like Mach 2, 3, boom, hits the ground and just plunges into like Earth's mantle, basically. A couple good panels where we see in the color version of the Eclipse comic, you see this like hazy kind of like blacklight poster version of first person point of view of Miracleman kind of like emerging or just like working his way up, kind of like Beatrix Kiddo from the grave, trying to like work his way out of the dirt and rubble that's well above his head. There's just a ton of gravity to these punches too, man. Like you'll see the wind up, and then you'll see Miracleman in outer space.
Before Miracleman like joins the battle, before he kind of like his Komoda, he just kind of said like he just kind of has this resigned look on his face like. Komoda.
Good panel.
Yeah.
Good panel. A lot comes across just say with the imagery and the word because he's like, I kind of knew this would have to happen, and you feel the gravity of it like kind of on his shoulders.
Yeah, it's like duty. Like this is his duty. Like one of the punches that Kid Miracleman throws, Miracleman goes flying and like the drawing is just like you see kind of like the damage on his face, and he looks almost like a Drew Friedman. Drawing of like Rondo Hatton or something, it's like not typical superhero stuff. Like their faces are getting shredded up, or at least Miracleman's is because he's really outclassed by Kid Marvelman. Kid Marvelman is like he started out as his little sidekick, his inferior, and he mentions again this is more paying really close attention to detail. He's saying, look, I've been an active superhuman for 25 years. You're an active superhuman for what? 8 years or whatever it was. So I've figured out powers that you don't, like I'm capable of things that you don't even understand. You're not even aware of. And I've just, been able to like sort of,
get those reps.
Yeah.
Get those reps in, man. Get that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours.
Yeah, he has 10,000 hours of superpowers.
The cliffhanger of this first chapter is that Kid Miracleman punches Miracleman and Miracleman's under a ton of rubble. This chapter's done.
Yeah, until next issue, which might take 2 months or 3 months or whatever.
That's the thing with these kind of comics. The suspense of that kind of drama is meaningless.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the losses when it's, serialized in like a more like generous way. And so yeah, chapter 2 starts with like we're back to
let's call it chapter 6.
Chapter 6, okay. Yeah, chapter 6 starts with like we're back to Liz Moran and she's driving her car and she's like remembering what Mike said to her, like get out of town, get as far away from this as possible, and she's driving and then young Bates just is just standing in front of the car,
crashes right into him.
Yeah, she crashes right into him and the car's like decimated and there's not a scratch on him. And I love this part, like she gets out of the car and she's like, can't believe her eyes. And then he starts to crumple the car up and he almost crumples it up to like the size of like a basketball. Like it's kind of amazing, just like really this demonstration of powers. And you know what, like the things we've been talking about of like how these, like this kind of fight, we haven't seen a fight like this in American superhero comics. There's like the Marvel comics that have kind of had interesting fights that were sort of kind of well thought out and maybe, getting close to something like this. But then these types of characters who have Superman level powers or like Shazam, those are owned by DC, and DC's fights were never any like I mean it was so rare that Superman would even face someone that was even close to being in the same. Most of the time it would be like bank robbers pointing a gun at him and him going like that to it. That's the action of this type of power character. So Alan Moore's coming up with these like credible ways of depicting fights between beings of like power that we can't even imagine. Like Spider-Man, even Captain America, even Thor. It's kind of like it's within some sort of realm, but these are like Superman level. So this is all new territory.
And putting that extra thought into like beings of this type. Another thing that was never explored in the old American comics, it really is just like how the everyman would kind of react to witnessing such a thing, all the way up to, say, the first responders. So we get a page that isn't far from the Dark Knight Returns page, where there's like a passing of the buck situation, where it goes from the president to the governor, to the mayor, all the way down to the police commissioner on the page in this chapter. So it starts off with like the uniformed police, and they're like, we're not paid well enough for this.
Everybody's like, we're gonna wait and see how this thing plays out.
But then they keep sending it up the chain, and like the commissioner's like, F this, keeps getting sent up the chain, and then there is like a couple of yellow blips. The fight is still going on, by the way. A couple of yellow blips or something that show up on like an Air Force computer, but even they aren't ready to handle this bit. They keep sending it up the chain, and eventually it comes across the desk of the people who were a part of Project Zarathustra. And this is where we get the first glimpses of perhaps like the true origin of Miracleman. First mention of Evelyn Cream, the dude with the diamond...
the sapphire teeth.
Yeah.
And like the sapphire, like why sapphire teeth? But like blue is like a real important color to Alan Moore also. Like he's like My Blue Heaven was like a Swamp Thing issue, and the land of like the dead or of spirits or whatever in one of his works was called like the Azure, and so like blue means something like but yeah, we'll get to like his teeth later. The way it's real funny and very like Cold War, the way the Project Zarathustra gets like how those people get alert, Sir Dennis Archer and all them get alerted, because it's just this like control panel with like one yellow light on it, and the yellow light comes on.
Yeah. And
then it's like, like, so there's somebody whose whole job was just to watch that one light, and then as soon as it comes on, he has to like, get it, get on, do whatever. But it's like, that's kind of cool to me, like in a retro way.
There's a great caption that kind of like gives us the score when it comes to Kid Miracleman, and perhaps a tiny bit of motivation for the character. Alan Moore just simply states, like in this form, the Kid Miracleman has forgotten. He's been in this form long enough to have forgotten the joys and curiosities of like being a normal human being. So he is something else, a god amongst men, so to speak, man, and that has perverted his mind, allowing him to do these sorts of like violence and all that.
Yeah, this is like a part of like like I think it's part of Nietzsche too, but it's like a part of these like stories of like when you create like the perfect being is like immediately they look at you and are like, oh well, you suck, and you got to get erased because like I'm so great and you're nothing. So that's happening here. And I also like wonder if it's a little bit of like Darkman or something where it's like he's if you can't like feel anything, if nothing can hurt you, you like maybe like like get this like build up of like weird emotions or whatever. You kind of lose touch with your own humanity.
And he's beyond losing touch with his humanity. His ego and hubris is reaching a point where he is allowing his mouth to speak before his brain engages. He accidentally says the M word, Miracleman.
Yeah, that's his like keyword that turns him back, turns him into Kid Miracleman or turns him back into Johnny Bates. And he says it, and he's gloating. Like he's gloating, he has defeated Miracleman. Like it's not like Miracleman, like Peter Parker or something figured out some like cool way to fool this, to take him down. He was beaten, and only by luck and because of like the hubris that the guy gloats, and in gloating he like says his magic word,
Says
and like
Beetlejuice 3 times.
yeah, and then the lightning strikes, and he's just a little kid again, and he's like a little kid from the 60s. Miracleman's coming right for him, and like, you know what, I gotta just kill him right now, because he's gonna say that word any minute now, and then we're gonna be back where we started. So, and he's about to like take his head off or whatever, and then he says, "No, Miracleman, it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it was it." And like he's like, "Oh wait, he just said his magic word again," and nothing's happening. He's not changing back. So something fried. The build up from being Kid Miracleman all these years, created this like surge when he turned back, that it's like burnt out the whatever the mechanism is that lets you change back and forth.
And in that superhero moment, he doesn't do away with the boy. I bet there's some Joseph Campbell component to that, man, where it's like you're faced with this thing, and then you don't.
Well, it's a mistake. Like maybe not killing him, but he and Liz abandon Kid Miracleman instead of maybe taking him with them or whatever, and that's like a loose end that he left that ends up being like his downfall or his near downfall or whatever. So
Should we jump to chapter 7, which will be the third chapter of this issue?
okay, yeah.
This is the Alan Davis drawn issue with the Gary Leach inks, man.
Yeah, the transition has been kind of seamless. That it's been so like gradual.
Yeah, and Gary Leach is there to like create the connective tissue between all the pages. So he'll phase out over time. We'll get different artists. Some are better matches than others.
Yeah,
but
your mileage may vary.
this is the page where, in this chapter, one of the things I like about Moore, and one of the things that I've been studying a lot when we do our readings, and just on my own because I'm writing my own stuff right this minute, is paying attention to the transitions. Nobody can do transitions like Alan Moore does. He clearly puts a lot of thought and effort in creating this seamless transition from one scene to the next without the clunky use of, generally speaking, without the clunky use of just like a caption that says "the next morning" or "at the Daily Bugle," something like that.
Yeah.
Every page of this chapter, probably about 8 pages, is basically its own unit, and there's like a title caption for each page. With the first page here, it's attrition of this chapter. It's called Attrition. And this is the first true glimpse of Project Zarathustra. This is the first true glimpse that maybe it wasn't a cosmic wizard who helped, came to Earth and created Miracleman. It's a bunch of like smarty pants, technocrats who are in the government who are calling these characters monsters.
Monsters, yeah.
How many times do we have to kill a monster? And they're putting measures in place to discover this guy, and like they have to get rid of these guys for the good of the Earth.
Yeah.
It was a mistake. We created H-bombs with brains and imagination. What can go wrong? Turns out a lot. And then the next chapter is called Excursions. That's the one with Miracleman and Liz kind of going off into the sticks, far away from human eyes. And what happens if you are a superhuman and you forget all of the things that you're capable of, or you see Kid Miracleman display some things that you didn't even know were possible?
Yeah, this is the part that's like really like taken from Greatest American Hero, where it is like you don't know the extent of your powers, and then your girlfriend or wife has sort of like a little more street smarts than he does. He's kind of got his head in the clouds, and he takes a lot of this stuff for granted. And like she's asking all these like really good questions, and she's approaching it kind of like methodically, where he's just kind of reacting and just like going with whatever.
Yeah, she's like Mickey from Rocky, she's like the little coach, and there is no textbook for being a superhero. But there is a big body of work when it comes to American comic books. And that's exactly what she does. She buys some American comic books and then creates her checklist of superpowers, has them try them out.
Yeah, and she's like, this stuff is, most of it's crap. Some of it's better than you would think it is. most of it's crap.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
which
yeah.
I would like is
That's
kind
a
of
little
like
Alan Moore.
yeah, that's Alan Moore's assessment. Yeah.
Page 3 would be called Reflections, and this is the page where we have Johnny Bates, young Johnny Bates, in mental anguish and turmoil in like kind of an asylum, a psychiatric hospital, being observed, and we get to see a nice kind of like splash panel revealing that Kid Miracleman is in there
Yeah.
basically. It's going to be, well, we'll get to that in a second. But like Kid Miracleman is in there, and he's kind of hounding and goading and needling young Johnny Bates to let him back out, let him back out. But he's at this point, little Johnny's holding strong.
Yeah, it's like you could almost picture like the BBC adaptation of this, where it's like just this like black, like Doctor Who or something, this black room with like no background, no, and just these two actors kind of, and we come back to it again and again. This sort of like, the devil on your shoulder and the angel on your shoulder.
Good treatment with the color on this panel too, where it's just this like red, like a dark room, just beat red, man. Red communicates evil, violence, anger. The next page is called Deduction, and that's Evelyn Cream, the kind of hired gun from the government who's being tasked with. Well, we don't know what he's being tasked with exclusively yet, but we're starting to get a glimpse that it's like he needs to find out who the heck Miracleman is, and through his powers of deduction, whenever Miracleman first kind of like reared his head, the only people that were there were people from the press and terrorists. Though if you look at page 1, that ain't the case.
Yeah.
But we'll let that be. And off the bat, he checks off all of the terrorists. Like none of them can be him. Most of them are dead or like super burned up and screwed up. So it has to be somebody from the press. So he has that list. He enters the hospital under the guise of being like a renowned burn trauma doctor. And that's when the nurses are like, "Did you see he has blue teeth?"
Yeah.
Next page is called Annunciation.
Yeah, this is getting into like religious stuff.
This page is the page where Miracleman is picking up boulders,
Right, okay,
breaking them on himself, and Liz makes the conclusion that there must be two bodies that inhabit, like only one can inhabit this space time, but there's the Mike Moran body persona, there's the Miracleman body persona. They don't necessarily share the exact same brain, but they share elements of it. And when one body is in the real world, the other body is in some other kind of like space-time or some sort of like holding tank or something. And this is where part of like how she makes this conclusion is that during the fight with Johnny Bates, Miracleman gets his face burned up really, really bad. And when he switches to the Mike Moran persona, none of that is there. But when he switches back to Miracleman after some time, the burns are healing up. So that's like a clear indication that it's not the same body. Moore is sort of the same thing he will do eventually on Swamp Thing. He's doing a first round draft here with Miracleman to try to take this like very silly golden age superhero and try to like update it for the modern time.
This I feel like the kind of this conclusion that Moore has come to about how this sort of Captain Marvel kind of character would work has been almost like crowdsourced up to this point, because there were the old Captain Marvel's stories. They didn't really have any clear, like they didn't give you any clear insight. You'd kind of have to infer like exactly what's going, like that was just beyond the scope of these things. But then you had like the 70s Marvel Captain Marvel, where for a time like Rick Jones would bang his wrists together, and then Captain Marvel would be in the negative zone, and then he'd pop out, and then Rick Jones would go back to the negative zone. So it's almost like Moore is like building on that like Roy Thomas or Jim Starlin or whoever came up with this piece of the puzzle, and now like Alan Moore's refining it. So it's basically like comics superhero fandom has been like working away at this problem for a really long time, and Alan Moore comes in with like the authoritative analysis of it. There's just like that sort of dissection of how superheroes work too, of like, okay, I look at your body and it's like, okay, you're muscular, but like physics say that if you were that kind of, you wouldn't, your muscles would have to be the size of beach balls, she says, to do the things, and you have like a dancer's body or like a swimmer's body, and if you throw a rock up in the air and it hits you on the head or whatever, even if you're not hurt, you're going to get driven into the ground. So why aren't you? And so she comes to this conclusion that your powers might be coming from your mind, and that it might be this like sort of energy field, this Tinkerbell effect they call it, of like sort of sparkles and things that he had, this like super powerful aura, that might be your powers, not any kind of muscle or physical thing. It's all mental.
The second he like lays out that term Tinkerbell effect, when the American cartoonists start drawing this shit, man, John Totalbin specifically, we're going to see that Tinkerbell effect in action. After Liz is describing that there are like two of you,
and you're not exactly the same person. You're kind of the same person, but not really.
She has to drop that cuckold bombshell, man, while she's riding shotgun and saying, "Oh yeah, I haven't had a period in a couple of months, and I'm pregnant with Miracleman's baby."
And that's where the Annunciation comes in, because in like the story of Christ, Annunciation is when the angel comes down to Mary, the mother of Christ, and says, you have a baby on the way, and it's magic. It's
a God baby.
Yeah, it's a God baby. So that's the message of, I'm having a God baby.
What would I do without you, Tom? And then to kind of like break form a little bit, the very last bit, the last titled sequence is called Sanction, and it's the only 2-page piece of this chapter, and that's Evelyn Cream in the hospital. He's going to see one of the burnt-up terrorists who were nearby whenever Mike Moran said the magic words Kimota and created that kind of like little nuclear blast that burnt all those dudes up, man, and turned them into steaks and hamburgers, man. He goes to one of the terrorists, and the terrorist, his eardrums are blown up, so there's an audible component to the transformation too. Guy's deaf, and Evelyn Cream writes on a piece of paper, did you see who turned into Miracleman, or
Yeah,
like what
right.
happened?
Yeah.
And the guy does, man, and is like, it's the reporter. Evelyn Cream's like, which one? He says the blonde one, and that firmly 100% confirms that it's Mike Moran. Perhaps all the other pressmen are brunettes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like the game Guess Who.
Exactly.
They can like knock down all the...
Totally. And we get to see on the final page that Evelyn Cream, he means business. He's a tough guy, and working for the government, man, he has to like do away with all the loose ends. And this terrorist saw a little bit too much, so he asphyxiates a dude, pinches the nose, pinches the mouth, and you see the like Will Eisner comics and sequential art passage of time, where we have a strategically placed clock right over the shoulder of Evelyn Cream that has the exact amount of time. 4 minutes goes by, which is the amount of time needed to suffocate a person. And the very last final panel of that chapter is a twisted up, fucked up terrorist that I just imagining the reference photo used in this thing, it would probably look like a damn crime scene exhibit A kind of piece of photography, because it is. Gary Leach is a photo refer with the best of them, man, and you can't make up some of these poses and the sort of elegant musculature and the way the light hits the figure. He's looking at something.
That scene, it's my favorite scene of the issue, and it's like we got all this like superheroic stuff, and this is like very like the special effects budget or whatever isn't much for this. It's like that that Bob Dylan video or whatever, where he's like showing the different cards, like it's all just like showing.
Oh right, yeah.
But it's like it's really bad. He's like, I promise I won't hurt you. One of the cards says, I promise I won't hurt you, and then he's like, remember when I said I wasn't going to hurt you? I lied, and then the guy's chilled. Such a great scene, but it's like amazing to me as like a piece of comics, and I feel like Moore's having a breakthrough here, because this is the moment where the story is at its most naturalistic, because they're having a soundless conversation in a soundless medium. When you're reading those cards, you're doing the same thing you're doing when you're reading a dialogue balloon, but it's naturalistic, because a dialogue balloon would have accompanying noise, and it doesn't. So it kind of like brings you into the story that much more, because it's a thing that is like seamless. And I feel like that lesson he took with him to Watchmen, that like so much of the story of Watchmen will be like somebody doing something, walking by, and then in the background there's signage, there's all kinds of signage with words on it that you're reading the same way you would read a caption or read a dialogue balloon, but you don't realize you're reading. You think you're just looking at the scene, but you're actually reading and taking in story information. And I feel like this is like the beginning of him kind of that stuff clicking into place, like how powerful the printed word is in a medium of print.
Sounds great to me. The other thing that is noteworthy of the sequence, it being a silent sequence, is that it's probably one of the few pages or series of pages that is just like 1 second after the other because of the very slight page count that we get. So much of this material has to be told like kind of in caption,
Yeah.
and sometimes the panel to panel transition might be say 15 or 20 minutes of time as opposed to second by second, which is this little sequence right here. In the last chapter 8 of this issue, Mike Moran not dealing with the fact that Liz had sex with his Miracleman form and is pregnant with the superhero baby. So it's just kind of like reinforcing the fact that this Moran guy is just a human, is just a guy, and
flawed,
very much
imperfect. They spell out that like they tried to have kids all these years and were never able to, but then one night with him and boom, you're pregnant, and so he has this like inferiority complex with presumably his own self, like they, like you said,
that's every inferiority complex is just that, you know?
Yeah, it's your it's a story you're telling yourself. Miracleman, he's smarter than me. Like he like it's my thoughts and my memories, but when I'm him, everything has a poetry and a beauty, and when when I'm him and he loves you, it's pure, and when I'm me and I love you, it's all tied up in who's not doing their share of the washing up and all this kind of stuff. Like really nice turns of phrase.
Yeah, some good character stuff, and throughout this entire book, the words on the page, man, really sing, and really you learn a lot about these characters with everything they say. But this chapter is sort of very little happens. Like we have several pages. It's almost divvied up in half, and half of it is the issues between Mike Moran and the Liz character and the baby and the cuckold situation, and then the last half is that Evelyn Cream government agent guy stalking Mike Moran, and they pull a good scam on Mike Moran to get hold of him. It's established that when he says the magic words Kimota to turn into Marvel Man, that there's thunder cracks, there's heat, there's explosive stuff. So some other government agent lady, she's very willing to like sacrifice her baby.
Yeah, I wondered about what that's, because there's a couple different ways you could interpret it. Because I thought like, oh, has Evelyn Cream just been following him around, just waiting for the right moment? And then finally, just by happenstance, there's like a woman with her baby. And it's like, oh, could you hold my, like, and it's like, well, that's too neat. That's too neat of a coincidence. But then it's like, if she is working with Cream, because like if she is working with Cream, I don't think that's her baby. I think it's like two government agents. They kidnap a baby or took a baby from like a state-run, children's ward or whatever, orphan or whatever, but the baby's being set up as like a sacrificial lamb. After the whole thing is done, where now he's holding this baby, and then Mr. Evelyn Cream shoots him or says
Has the gun on him
and says, if you turn into your other self, what happened to those terrorists? What do you think's going to happen to this little baby you're holding? And so then like he shoots him, and you see from Miracleman's point of view as he's like he sees like the woman, and the woman, she kind of leans against Cream, and it's like you can't really tell if she's leaning against him because they're co-conspirators and it's like, hey, we didn't, or maybe it's his girlfriend or whatever, or if it's like she's passing out because she can't believe that a guy just shot somebody who's holding her baby, and
she doesn't like, she looks shifty. There's some
think, yeah.
The lighting to me suggests, because he captures a furrow to the brow and maybe a little bit of a smile, man, that it's like mission accomplished.
Yeah, it's a cool moment. For sure.
I mean, what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to do another episode where we read Miracleman number 3 to figure out those answers. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been addressed yet, certainly when it comes to the origin of the character.
Yeah, and we kind of know the answers, and they're like really good. They're like really interesting answers coming up.
We'll do another episode of Miracleman after this for sure.
Yeah.
But right at this moment, I think it's time for us to get back to making our own comics. Tom, what do you say,
Yeah,
man?
definitely.
You guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, and follow the YouTube channel. Once you do that, make sure you hit the bell icon, and it'll notify you whenever we have new videos available. You can support us by hitting up our spread shop for merchandise, coffee cups, or t-shirts, or whatnot. Those links are below this video here in the description. Tom, give them a plug.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom Sholey or on Instagram at Toms_Sholey.
Tom's information, as well as mine and Jim's, is in the description below as well. But we're going to get back to business. Kayfabers, you know what your marching orders are. Hit it.
Read more comics.
Moore.